Hi, so in this video I'm going to be talking about Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, and before we get into Bloom's taxonomy, I want to ask these questions that kind of give you a hint or an idea about what Bloom's taxonomy is all about. Okay, so before I explain Bloom's taxonomy, have a look at these. Now, what I want you to do is think about which of these are more difficult. Which is more difficult? Number one, remembering information or analyzing information. Which of those is more difficult, remembering or analyzing? Okay, now I'm sure you can guess the answer is probably analyzing, right? Analyzing information is more difficult than remembering information. Number two, evaluating information or understanding information. Which is more difficult? Okay, so the answer you can probably guess is evaluating information. I guess that evaluating information is more difficult than understanding information. And number three, applying or using information and creating new information. Which of these is more difficult? Okay, they can both be difficult, but I would guess that creating new information is more difficult than using information or kind of following information that you've found. Okay, so I would guess creating is more difficult. Okay, so have a look at these. Now, you can see here that different tasks, different mental tasks that we do can have different levels of difficulty, and that gives you a hint about what Bloom's taxonomy is all about. So let's have a look at Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so this is Bloom's taxonomy, and it's usually presented in a triangle or a pyramid shape. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about this. Okay, so Bloom was an educational psychologist, and in the 1950s he was tasked with developing some educational content and frameworks related to testing in the USA. So Bloom and a team of educational experts developed this taxonomy. It's called Bloom's taxonomy of learning. Now, what does taxonomy mean? Taxonomy means classification. It's a classification. So what this is a classification of various different levels of thinking. Okay? Different levels of mental processes, different levels of cognitive abilities. Okay, so as I mentioned, they're usually presented in a kind of triangle or pyramid shape. And here you can see actually the same words that I used in the previous questions about which ones were more difficult. Starting at the bottom of the triangle, you can see remembering. Next, understanding. Then applying. Then analyzing. Then evaluating, and at the top, creating. Okay, so interesting thing about Bloom's taxonomy, it doesn't start at the top, it starts at the bottom, because the bottom is the lower order thinking skills. You can see next to remembering, it says lower order thinking skills. So the bottom is kind of the base level of thinking, the base level of mental processes. And as we go up the triangle, each level is a more difficult and more taxing level of cognitive processing. So remembering information is kind of the basic level. Next is understanding, and then moving up, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. The top levels of Bloom's taxonomy are called higher order thinking skills. These are more complex levels of thinking, and they actually build on the previous levels of the taxonomy. So in order to do the things like analyze, evaluate, and create, we need to be able to remember, understand, and apply. So that's why these are higher order thinking. Right, so this is a very general educational concept. It's not just related to language teaching or to the field that we're talking about in this course. But I do think it's a really useful and interesting concept. And we can use this to think about the design of activities, the design of materials, and also what kind of questions that we're going to ask at different parts of a lesson or a syllabus or a course. So generally, when you are introducing a new topic or you're teaching some new language, you want to start with the lower order thinking. So at the beginning, you want to just focus on remembering things and understanding things, the lower order thinking skills. So you might have activities or questions that are focused on these lower levels of Bloom's taxonomy. As the class progresses or as the syllabus progresses, you can move the students and push them forwards and upwards in the taxonomy towards applying. So this is using information, and analyzing. So this is looking at different parts of information, comparing and looking at similarities and things. And then later on, you can push them up to the higher levels of thinking, evaluating and creating. So evaluating could be things like book reports after reading. It could be like giving opinions, debating about a topic, debating about a newspaper article, for example. And then creating would be students creating their own materials or language, maybe a writing activity or a role play or something like that. So I think this is really useful. It's kind of a very foundational concept with education, and it can really help with planning and preparing lessons and materials. Okay, so I've shown you kind of the general visual of Bloom's taxonomy, but now let's have a look at some of the text related to it. So Bloom's taxonomy of thinking provides a framework for teachers to focus on higher order thinking. By providing a hierarchy of levels, it can help with designing performance tasks, creating questions for students, and providing feedback on student work. Okay, and I've put the 6 levels of the taxonomy here again with some just a little bit of text information. So remember, we start at the bottom. So let's start with remembering. So remembering is just recall the basic facts, recall the basic information. Next is comprehend or understand. So this is understand the basic facts and ideas. Moving up to apply. This could be solving problems with information that has been learned. Okay, so following information and using that to solve something. It could be, for example, following instructions also. Moving up to analyze. So this means to examine and identify motives and causes and components and parts and kind of looking at different aspects of the information. Okay, moving up to evaluate. Here students can present, maybe written or spoken, or defend opinions and ideas. So evaluate is all about opinions and ideas, preferences, kind of debating those kind of topics. Okay, moving up to the top of Bloom's taxonomy is create, and this means to combine information in new ways. Okay, so taking different sources, combining, creating something new. Okay, so here's another little task for you. Here are 6 different questions or activities, and I want you to match them with the levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So here is the task. Which level of Bloom's taxonomy is each of these tasks? Okay, and you can think about this. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 1, compare the sports player in the text with your favorite sports player. Okay, have a look at the 6 levels in the triangle and think about which level matches with this. Okay, the answer I would say is analyzing, because here you're analyzing a sports player from a reading text and comparing with your own sports player. So you're trying to find similarities and differences. Okay, number 2. Tell me the year of Isonshin's battle that you read in the text. Okay, which level of Bloom's taxonomy is this? Okay, now this is just a year that students have to remember. Okay, so I would say that this is the bottom level of Bloom's taxonomy, remembering. Okay, number 3. What does this word mean? Which level of Bloom's taxonomy is this? Okay, I would say this is understanding. And number 4. Can you write a new sentence using this word? Which level of Bloom's taxonomy is this? Okay, now some people guess create, but I would say that it's not actually that high level of creating. This is asking you to use the word in a new sentence. So this is, I would say this is applying a word, showing that you can apply a word into a new sentence. Okay, number 5. Do you think this opinion is correct, or do you agree with this opinion? Okay, of course, I'm sure you can guess this is evaluating. And number 6, make a new story with the same characters. What level is this? Okay, so writing a new story, taking the characters, taking the content of an old story and making a new story with it. This is creating. Okay, and here's a very practical example of how Bloom's taxonomy can influence lesson planning and organizing activities and questions. So following Bloom's taxonomy, we can create authentic task sequences. Have a look here. We've got remember and comprehend first. Comprehend is understand. And number 1 is input. We've got the input here. So here you have a menu, and this is the text input for the task. And here, for this first part of the lesson, you are expecting students to look at the menu and understand the menu. So understand things like the prices, the different sections, the various meals and food, the ingredients, the drink section, things like that. So it's just a kind of basic level of understanding the menu. Okay, moving on to the next section here, we've got apply and analyze. This is the processing. So here you're processing the menu in more detail. So here are some example questions. What are the main sections of the menu? Where are the main meals? Which meals are expensive? Which meals have seafood? Which drinks are non-alcoholic? So here you're analyzing the menu and applying ideas that you have to the menu. Okay, the final section now that students understand the menu and they've analyzed the menu, you can move on to evaluate and create. So this is number 3, action. We've got input, process, and action. And here are some example questions. Which starter do you want to order from the menu? Okay, this is kind of evaluate. If you only have $15, what will you order? Recommend a meal for your date or your mother or your child. So here students might be looking for food that isn't too spicy or food that's suitable for children. And the final question, which food items do you want to ask the waiter about? Okay, so now you're getting students to look at the menu, evaluate the menu in more detail. And of course, this is just a brief example, but of course then you could move on to kind of a role play with the menu. Once you've set up the activity, students understand the menu, they've analysed the menu, they've thought about what they want to order and what kind of questions they want to ask, then they can move on to doing a role play, which is more of create. Okay, so you can see that using the steps of Bloom's taxonomy can help with structuring and scaffolding. It's a really useful, great concept for teachers to consider. Okay, I hope that was useful.